Hi, my name is Rosita Arvigo from Germany, Cologne. I'm the owner of Yoni Spa, where one of the main treatments is actually the Yoni Steaming, also known as V-Steam or Vaginal Steam. And today I have the great honor to present you to Rosita Arvigo and her wonderful work. She is originally from the US but lives since many, many years in Central America and learned from different Mayan teachers. And as one part of it, it also includes the steaming. Unfortunately, sometimes the quality of the sound is not ideal. Therefore, I like to encourage you to open the transcript option of YouTube, which you find below the video, hidden under the 3 dots. So if you click on that, then you can click on Open Transcript. So now getting back to Rosita and letting herself speak about her and how she came about to do what she's doing.
I've lived in Central America almost 50 years, and during all that time I have spent a great deal of years with traditional healers, a midwife and also a Maya shaman. Don Delicio Panti was my primary teacher in the abdominal therapy, and then I worked for 10 years with a famous midwife in Belize, Miss Hortense Robinson. So from those two, I learned the traditional abdominal massage. And then what I did, because I am a doctor of naprapathy, which is an offshoot of chiropractic since 1907, mostly in the United States and some in Spain as well. So I combined what I learned in naprapathy and my 25 years in clinical practice. So in naprapathy, we become experts in connective tissue damage and ligamentous damage. And so when I learned this technique of lifting the uterus from these two wonderful traditional healers, I spent 20 years doing the anatomy and physiology research of how is this simple external ancient massage so incredibly effective. I mean, the people, women who came to Don Eligio and Miss Hortense's clinic, their results were just beyond amazing. So I really wanted to learn it. I did learn it, but then I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand it so then I could share it with the world, because as a practitioner and a clinician myself, I have never ever seen results with menstrual disorders, fertility issues, endometriosis and PMS and all of those things that unnecessarily plague women's lives. Doing the abdominal therapy that on the pelvis area lifts the uterus and then strengthens those ligaments. So the connection I made is because I understood ligamentous damage so fully from my own practice and my own training. I realized that the uterus is suspended in the pelvic floor by 14 different ligaments. Ligaments can be overstretched, which means then that the uterus could fall into the vagina, and the uterus can flip backward and could fall from side to side. And then the unfortunate thing occurs is that when it's in a malposition for many years, it forms adhesions and holds itself in that malpositioning. So that's why the external massage so incredibly beneficial. We gently move those ligaments and stretch where they have gotten overly tight. And when we put the uterus back in position, those overstretched ligaments naturally come back into their normal tensility. So that's how I learned it. That's how I combined my own practice and my own clinical experience with what I learned from these two traditional healers here in Belize.
Wow, that's so impressive. And can you really feel from the outside the uterus?
You can feel it if it is not in proper position. That's a very good question. The issue, if the uterus is anterior, meaning it's sitting too close over the bladder, you can feel it. If it's off to the right side, you can feel it. If it's to the left, you can feel it. If it's retroverted, no, you cannot feel it from the front, right? There are other ways to palpate the uterus that is retroverted. So in those situations, yes, but a uterus in normal position, no, you can't feel it. It's too far back. Unless then we would have to investigate to find out the signs and symptoms to determine, is this uterus in normal position or is it retroverted? And that's why we can't feel it. But if it's retroverted, the signs and symptoms are extremely clear. People with a retroverted uterus have very, very clear symptomology. There's usually no doubt that that is the cause. Often their menstruation begins with terrible backaches. And as soon as their blood begins to flow, the backache begins to lessen. That's because the uterus is leaning up against the sacrum, putting pressure on those nerves. And if that's been going on for years and years, then as the uterus fills with blood before menstruation, it weighs twice as much as normal. So that means that there's twice the amount of weight pressing up against these already irritated and inflamed nerves on the sacrum. So as your period begins, the weight of the uterus is less, and gradually the backache goes away. So that's a primary symptom of a retroverted uterus. Often people come with a diagnosis from a nurse practitioner or a midwife. Most women are told that their uterus is tipped, and most of the time, not always, but most of the time, medical professionals say, oh, but that's just normal. Everybody has a uterus that goes this way or that way, and there's nothing we can do about it. One woman told me that her gynecologist said, nothing we can do, but if it gives you trouble, come in and we'll take it out. Well, we know there's a better way. And
wonderful.
so, yeah. So that's the abdominal therapy. Yeah.
So from my side, my main interest is I learned that you also implement and use the vaginal steaming, because this is what I'm actually offering as like a separate treatment, you can say. I also add some belly massage and some breast massage and some pelvic hip massage as elements to strengthen the female aspect in the body and maybe where some issues are. But like the core, the heart of my treatment therapy is the steaming itself. Okay. So yes, that's why I'm interested to have your opinion and experiences about the steaming. Did you learn this also from the Mayan practitioners?
Yes, I did. I also, it's very common in Central America. So I lived in Mexico first, and I came to Belize. And in Mexico, I was there in the 1970s. And when a woman experienced any type of menstrual or reproductive disorder, the grandmother, the auntie, or the midwife would always say, first thing, have you done the vaginal steam? Right? And so that it is de rigueur. It's the first thing that women are instructed to do, or know that that's the first thing they should do. So I came to Belize, and when I began working with Don Eligio, about half of his practice were women, and he might see 200 clients in a week. So there were maybe 100 women who came to his little humble clinic in San Antonio Village for the abdominal massage and everyone was sent home with a bag of aromatic herbs for vaginal steaming. So yes, I have been using the vaginal steams in my own clinical practice and in my own trainings of the Arvigo techniques of Maya abdominal therapy since 1982. That's when I first introduced it, you might say, publicly outside of my own clinical practice. And I do them myself as well. And even though I'm postmenopausal, I still do a vaginal steam once or twice a year. So yes, they are extremely beneficial. It's an ancient technique for women that is possible for everybody to do. And the benefits are long. It's a very long list of benefits.
Have you heard about it before in the United States as well, or only in Central America?
No, only in Central America. No. I left America when I was 35. I've never gone back. And I'd never heard about the vaginal steams in the United States, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua. Very, very common. And of course, the ancient Maya at the island of Cozumel, which was the sanctuary of the goddess Ixchel, there is where women learn to perform, and to receive these vaginal steams in ancient days. So it was a place where Maya women trained midwives, where they trained traditional healers, and those who cared for women or those who cared for children. And we know that they found at this ancient Maya site on Cozumel Island, that they found places where women would sit over an open space, and there was a opening underneath to put the steaming clay pot at that time for the steam to enter. The vaginal steam is a fascinating subject physiologically, because we find that when women say that they have dark blood at the beginning of their menstrual cycle, dark blood at the end of the menstrual cycle, that is a primary indication this person needs a vaginal steam. And what the steam does when we use aromatic plants, that would be our favorite, are those gentle aromatics. And the steam and the aromatic substance, the essence of the plant, enters vaginally, enters the cervix, goes into the uterine membrane, the steam and the essential oil of the plant. We never use essential oils. They are too concentrated and irritating to the uterine membrane. So the steam goes into the body of the uterus, and just like you would think about heat to clean, like maybe an oven, right? If you think about how the oven looks when you're cleaning it, that's what the inside of the uterus looks like after a vaginal steam, so that it is able to soften and remove the enduration that occurs on the uterine membrane. So that means that a person who sees dark blood at the beginning of their cycle didn't completely clear out their uterine fluids during the last cycle, all right? If they see dark blood at the end of their cycle, that could be 20 years old. And so this is why we say enduration, meaning the membrane has become hardened with basically old, dry blood. So women report that that dark blood looks sometimes like chocolate syrup, sometimes like coffee grounds, and sometimes even a little bit of something that looks like tissue, which might very well be the very early stages of endometriosis. So the vaginal steam then, on the first day of the menstrual cycle, usually we do the vaginal steams the week before menstruation. Okay. And a woman must be informed. It's very, very important, Ricarda, that a woman is informed that that first cycle is likely to be very different. She may see more dark blood. She may see more sticking material pass. And that's all good. That means her uterine membrane is getting a good clean out. Sometimes women have a fertility challenge because the uterine membrane is so covered with these incompletely flushed fluids from previous cycles going back 20 years that there is not a sufficiently soft and juicy endometrium for the fertilized egg to attach. And that's how it helps with the fertility challenges. It cleanses the membrane of its enduration, and this is something that's very, very common with women. So it's something that we should all be doing all the time. It should be done before menstruation, not during menstruation, and then should not be done if there is a uterine or vaginal infection, and should not be done by women who have heavy bleeding unless they are being supervised by a properly trained practitioner. So we do that type of training for our practitioners to take care of women with extreme menstrual cycles. But we don't recommend that women do the vaginal steam without supervision if they are heavy bleeders.
Okay. And in some cases, I learned it's also okay to do it during menstruation, just in case that, for example, the uterus feels cold or the vagina itself, because there are some of these cycles where it can be extremely cold. So in this cases, I
personally, yeah, I guess they're go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be different opinions, but the only time I recommend a vaginal steam during menstruation is if the lady is trying to get pregnant. And if she's absolutely sure that she has her first day of a normal cycle, because we couldn't do it before the menstruation because she might have been pregnant, right? So on the first day of menstruation, as long as she is not a heavy bleeder, heavy bleeding is a contraindication without proper supervision. So on the first day of the menstrual cycle is the only time that I recommend doing the vaginal steam during menstruation.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying this. Yeah.
Sure.
And here's one question for you. It's about the history of and tradition of the vaginal steam. Why do you think there's so little information? I mean, you said it's in a tradition, but is there anything written down? Are there books? Are there historical proofs in a way that they're technique?
What proof?
I mean, that it stays alive, it's already a proof. And of course, I know a lot of Mayan information has been burned anyway.
Well, that's what happened. I'm sure there was written information the way the Maya were able to write with their pictographs and their hieroglyphs, right? But remember that this information was suppressed. First of all, we have the Spanish conquest, where everything that had to do with traditional medicine or with the ancient gods and goddesses was dangerous to talk about. People were arrested and mutilated and tortured if they practiced any of these traditions. And then you add to that the fact that people have always disrespected women's health. And more so in modern times. And the most common response that I get when I talk about this with medical professionals, oh, but that's old-fashioned. We don't do that anymore. That's too old-fashioned. So I don't have an answer for that except to say that the information was suppressed by the Catholic Church and the Spanish conquest, and that women's health has always been of secondary importance since modern times, forever. So I think that's why. But are there any books about it? No, there are chapters. I have a chapter in my book, Home Remedies, but proof is in the pudding. And you know, it's not easy to to take a photograph of somebody's menstrual cycle. You know what I mean? It's not an easy thing to record to a sense where there's proof other than subjective response. How did what happened? The woman is able to tell us, but are we able to photograph her menstrual cycle? What comes in her menstrual pad? And would you want to see that in the photograph?
No, but like we're saying, like a pictogram, like a woman sitting, and you can see some steam coming up, or something.
Yeah, I have that. I have that. There's a chapter in my book called Rainforest Home Remedies. Was published by HarperCollins in 2003. So yes, there is a chapter and there is a pictograph in that book. Yes.
But is this like an ancient pictograph of a Mayan site?
No. No, there is not. Too much has been lost. Yeah, there's just too much lost. It may become uncovered someday, but thus far I have researched the ancient Maya culture for 35 years. I have never seen that other than the evidence at Cozumel, which was the women's sanctuary in ancient days, where there appears to be a bench of open seats with slots underneath to put something that might have been like a clay pot. But it's, you know, it's guessing. Do we know that for sure? No.
Yes, I understand. But this is not only a tradition in the Mayan countries. I mean, this is a tradition. The more I practice, the more often I can hear people telling me. I had friends from Russia that were saying like, oh, my grandmother did it with me when I was a baby.
That's right.
Or same from Africa. Right. Actually there, I come across more often, not the steam, but the smoke. It's even still in the Bedouin cultures in Morocco area. They still do it, like they have long skirts on and no underwear, and then they stand on top of like they make a hole, and again they put herbs inside and coal, charcoal, and then they steam the vagina, but also the penis. I mean, it's for men and for women, interestingly. And like in Germany, we have what it's called Heublumenbad. It's like the grass which grows with the food for the animals, and the women would be sitting in the warm water. So these are kind of three similar and still a little bit different techniques. Yeah, it's a steam, it's the
right. I was in. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and it's a smoke. I was saying so.
Yeah, I've seen people do smoke here as well. That is another tradition, not as common as the vaginal steam with water, but I have seen that. And I made a trip to Morocco. I met a 98-year-old Moroccan midwife, and she knew about the abdominal therapy and lifting the uterus externally, and she also knew about vaginal steams. And so if she was 98, she'd been practicing for about, she wasn't any longer practicing, but she hadn't stopped that long ago. So I would say in her case, we know that in Morocco, in the 1930s, it was being recommended for women by their midwife. So I think this is a universal aspect of proper women's health care.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I guess you could say it's old-fashioned, but so is eating and bathing.
And old-fashioned means it's still alive since thousands of years. Right. It's actually a proof that it does work. Otherwise, it wouldn't stay alive, no?
Thank you. That's right. The fact that it's been with us for thousands of years and women still practice it in small villages where they never had the benefit of education, or sometimes they never learned to read or write, but they know how to do a vaginal steam. They know how to take care of their relatives and themselves when there is a uterine problem. So yes, it's been with us for a very long time, and I do believe it's universal.